It's claimed the worst attack in Afghanistan since the Taliban's return to power. The Islamic State Khorasan is now the group's greatest challenge. But what is it, and how much of a threat is it to the country and the world? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Abughaida. The U.S. is hours away from ending its longest war, but with its 20-year mission in Afghanistan finally coming to an end, it leaves behind a new threat. ISIL Khorasan, also known as ISIL K, has claimed responsibility for the Kabul airport attack on Thursday. It killed scores of people, including 13 U.S. service members, the highest number of deaths in a day for the American military in a decade. The armed group was formed in 2014 and has been responsible for some of the worst attacks in Afghanistan in recent years, and it's been labeled one of the world's most dangerous terrorist organizations. So has ISIL K found a new safe haven in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan? And is it a serious threat to stability in the nation? Let's get into today's discussion with our guests. Joining us from Swansea, Wales, is Aymenn Jawad Al-Tamimi, who's a research fellow at George Washington University's program on extremism. In Chancellery, Virginia, Kamran Bokhari, who's the director of analytical development at Newlines Institute for Strategic Policy. And over in Islamabad, joining us from there is Fahad Nabeel, who's a security analyst and independent researcher on militancy. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for your time with us on Inside Story. Fahad, over to you first. You've said this, that from 2016, there have been a number of counter-terrorism operations against this group, ISIL K, and the thought that it was dismantled. But the recent attacks, you say, have reinforced the threat from this group. So how big a threat is ISIL K in Afghanistan right now?
Basically, if we analyze this attack, the Kabul airport attack, before this attack, there have been several UN reports, which have pointed out this fact that the threat of ISIL K should not be discounted out. There have been planning this sleeper cells in Kabul, and they have been strengthening their efforts in and around Kabul. So this attack was not something which could not have been anticipated. There was intelligence about this attack. So in a way, we can say that they have this formidable strength in and around Kabul, because of which they were able to launch this attack.
But to what extent, Fahad, has the group been weakened throughout the years with the U.S. and Afghan military counterterrorism efforts, as well as, you'll remember back in 2017, the U.S. Dropping what it called the mother of all bombs in eastern Afghanistan on this group?
Yes, the group has been in a restructuring phase ever since the appointment of the new leader, Shabab al-Muhajir. So what he has been doing is kind of recruiting the new operational militants and operational commanders from other various factions in order to consolidate and boost their capabilities. And because of those capabilities, we have seen that they have been able to launch this high-profile attack.
Aymenn, over in Wales, do you agree with this assessment?
I think that when you look at Islamic State Khorasan province, I'd say it's actually been more of a mixed bag over the years in terms of their own successes and their fortunes. Actually, some of their in terms of by their own discourse and rhetoric, I think some of their biggest successes were in the very early years. The affiliate was announced in 2015, and then I remember the Islamic State's own Dareen magazine did an interview with the affiliate's overall leader, and he was boasting of so-called temkeen, or enablement in the land, allowing control of territory and implementation of Islamic laws in parts of eastern Afghanistan we're talking about. And then in contrast with the supposed apostate Taliban that was refraining from implementing Islamic law. But actually then that was degraded. And you certainly have seen various attacks carried out by the group over the years. Some were particularly bloody, for example, those targeting the Shia minority in Kabul. But I think the tendency of some to draw on this one particular attack in Kabul airport recently to draw a bigger conclusion about the group and its future in Afghanistan, I don't I don't see that as warranted.
I wonder, Aymenn, if you can just add on to this and tell us about the origins of the group, and perhaps if you have any facts and statistics, how many members does the group have currently today?
Yes, unfortunately, I don't have the knowledge to offer statistics on group numbers. I don't even like doing that in general. But what I can say about the origins of it, it largely drew on, in the very beginning, defectors from both the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban. So drawing people from both sides of the borders, for instance, Pakistani militants who'd gone over into eastern Afghanistan. They did also draw on some Uzbek fighters elsewhere in Afghanistan. But primarily today, it's something operating out of the east of the country. And they were claiming many attacks, for example, of a lower scale than this, of course, this bombing, which you could see as more opportunistic. But there were many attacks, for example, they claimed in the city of Jalalabad in recent months, which say assassinating Afghan government personnel. And also they claimed some more small-scale attacks as the Taliban was taking over the country, attacks against the Taliban. But again, those are very small scale.
Yeah.
And this particular Kabul attack, I see it that was more of a ripe opportunity to do it amid a very hasty and disorganized withdrawal of the US and other Western countries from Afghanistan.
Okay, Kamran, in Virginia, do you agree with the assessment that the aim of the attack on Thursday at Kabul airport was meant to sow instability on behalf of the group? And what do you think the long-term aim of ISIL K is in Afghanistan? Are they looking to build some sort of caliphate like ISIL in Iraq and Syria?
Yes, to the answer to your question, both questions is yes, but let me elaborate. So as I pointed out in my Wall Street Journal piece from Saturday, that the Taliban emirate will not succeed for a simple reason, that you cannot have a group that is deeply ideological and has pretty much a similar ideology. There's very little difference in the ideology of Taliban and ISIS, because the only difference is in terms of the type of state that they want. Otherwise, the ideology is similar, and this is a fluidic battle space, both in physical and ideational terms. So the more the Taliban become pragmatic, the more they're going to lose people, and that is what ISIS is counting on. Now, ISIS has for many, many years, beginning in Iraq, even when it was not called ISIS, it essentially emerged, started its bombing campaign in the midst of a chaos. So now what you have is an Afghan government that has collapsed dramatically in 9 days. U.S. forces are all but gone. The Taliban have not taken over, as in, they're just putting down roots. They haven't announced a government. And so this is a transition period that is very chaotic. And this is the opportunity that ISIS is always looking for to start its operations. And I suspect that these operations will become more and more intense and more frequent as time goes by. And yes, I mean, look, if Iraq and Syria are places where their caliphate was dismantled, and they're going to try elsewhere. And this is a place where the U.S. forces have pulled out, and there isn't any likelihood of the United States going back in a big way. It may send tens of thousands of troops if the situation worsened, like they did in Iraq in 2014, but they're not going to bring in, the large amounts of troops into the country. And there is no state to begin with. So this, from ISIS's point of view, is great. And then there is a lot of room where they can operate. Aymenn was right that there's a huge Pakistani Taliban presence, people who are disaffected by the Pakistani Taliban or were in groups like Lashkar-e-Jhangvi who crossed over into ISIS. And so this is seen as a fertile battle space by ISIS.
So let me just get this straight. What you're saying also is that the group, in your opinion, wants to establish a caliphate and also wants to reestablish some sort of relevance in Afghanistan?
Well, they're already relevant. They just have to expand their operations. They have to take advantage of the vacuum, the strategic vacuum that has been created. They will want to expand into Pakistan as well, where there is fertile ground and places on the western periphery of Pakistan that were formerly under the control at one point from 2007 to the early 2010s by the Pakistani Taliban. So this is a battle space that they know. At the end of the day, ISIS in Khorasan or ISIS in Afghanistan aren't people from outside. This isn't ISIS parachuting people from the mothership that in the Arab world. These are locals who are battle hardened. They know the terrain, and they're coming out under a new label, and they see that they have a better opportunity to overwhelm the situation because the Taliban are now veering into pragmatism because they have to govern. And these are precisely the kind of conditions that ISIS, which is a hardline, perhaps the most extreme jihadist group in the world, definitely the most extreme jihadist group in the world, is going to try and take advantage of.
Okay, Fahad, we've seen the U.S. responding militarily so far to the group, but does this run the risk, rather, of drawing American forces back into Afghanistan at some point when, they're supposed to be leaving and ending this war in just a few hours' time?
I don't think so that American officials will be thinking about coming back to Afghanistan once they are leaving in a few hours from now on, because Afghan Taliban will not be happy with this decision of even returning of American troops on the ground in Afghanistan. So they will have to rely on Afghan Taliban and have to sort of form a tactical cooperation with them in order to deal with the ISIS threat of Khorasan.
Okay, we're going to talk about the relationship between the Taliban and ISIL K in just a moment. But first, Aymenn, let me ask you this. In 2015, the group released an audio tape in which the speaker revealed the group's expansions into what he called the lands of Khorasan. And that's a term that encompasses not just Afghanistan, but areas as well of South Asia, as well as reportedly parts of China. So how much of a threat does ISIL pose to other countries?
I would clarify, actually, yes. So originally, when Islamic State Khorasan province was announced, I'm pretty sure the idea of that was not only Afghanistan, but a wider region. And in particular, for example, including Pakistan. And even the Islamic State Khorasan affiliate leader, he talked about attacks in Pakistan in an interview in Darvik in 2016. But what you actually have seen now with the Islamic State is they've designated separate so-called provinces for actually both Pakistan and India. And they claim attacks and put out media propaganda under those labels. So the Khorasan province label actually currently now, it only seems to apply to the Islamic State operating in the borders of Afghanistan as we recognize them. So actually, in a way, there has always been this attack capacity for Islamic State in the region beyond the borders of Afghanistan, and it was then formalized through the creation of these separate new provinces of Pakistan and India.
Fahad, in Islamabad, how is Pakistan going to deal with this threat?
Right now, currently, it does not pose a serious threat or immediate threat to Pakistan. However, in future, if this Khorasan province is able to exert a territorial control in Afghanistan or is able to increase its numerical strength, then it can possibly become a serious threat to Pakistan.
Right, but according to a Congressional Research Service report, Fahad, I mean, it pretty much outlines that many of its initial members were fighters with the Tehreek-e Taliban in Pakistan. That's an organization in Pakistan. Give us some context to that.
Yes, back in January 2015, when the Khorasan province was officially launched, defectors from Pakistani Taliban, Afghan Taliban, some members from Al-Qaeda and Islamic Movement of Afghanistan joined together to form this Khorasan province. So there were a number of Pakistani Taliban militants who joined and switched allegiance from TTP, Tehreek-e Taliban Pakistan, to Khorasan province. So over the years, they were able to attack or claim attacks in Pakistan due to their collaboration with local groups, including Lashkar-e-Jaish Almi. Because of their collaboration with these groups, they were able to claim or conduct high-profile attacks in Pakistan. However, in May 2019, when they formed their own Islamic State Pakistan province, they have, in a way, decided to work on an individual basis instead of collaborating with other local militant groups.
Okay, so as you've been hearing, the Taliban and ISIL K aren't the only armed groups operating in and around Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda has been a primary U.S. target in Afghanistan since 2001. A report by the U.S. Defense Department says the group poses a limited threat because it's mainly focused on survival. There's also the Haqqani network. It's an official semi-autonomous component of the Afghan Taliban and an ally of Al-Qaeda. There's also a number of smaller groups like the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, that's also known as the Pakistani Taliban. Its fighters fought alongside the Afghan Taliban against the Afghan government. Kamran, back to you. So reports seem to suggest that ISIL K are linked to the Taliban via a third party, and that party is the Haqqani network. What is the relationship between the three?
So it's not really clear that the Haqqani network is linked to ISIS. It is definitely the case that the Haqqanis are linked to both Pakistani intelligence and Al-Qaeda. And the Haqqanis now occupy a position in the senior leadership of the Taliban movement. So, and they claim, my institute here at the Newlines Institute for Strategy and Policy, our magazine, the Newlines magazine, published a piece today by an Afghan journalist who interviewed Anas Haqqani, the youngest son of the founder of the Haqqani network and the brother of Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is the #2 leader under Mullah Haibatullah in the Taliban leadership. And in that piece, you know, it's very clear that the Taliban, the Haqqanis are very much Taliban, and they want to be able to gain power. But yes, this is a fluidic battle space. The more hardline elements can, as I've been arguing, can be disillusioned very easily if the Taliban start to make compromises on ideology. And so a lot of these Haqqanis can go over to, the ISIS. And because the Haqqanis are linked to not just Al-Qaeda, but other foreign fighters like people from Central Asia, the Russian Federation, even Uyghurs, there is a huge risk of this spillover and becoming a conduit for people who are now under the Taliban moniker, the Afghan Taliban moniker, to go over and cross over and say, you know, we're joining ISIS and strengthening their ranks. We saw this in Syria.
Right.
There were multiple groups that were not ISIS, but they lost a lot of fighters to ISIS over the years.
Aymenn, what is the relationship like between the Taliban and ISIL K? Are they rivals, as many analysts seem to say, or is the relationship not so black and white?
No, actually, I would say it is a black and white relationship between Islamic State Khorasan province and Taliban. Because in the Islamic State's view, or in the view of Islamic State Khorasan province, at least, and also the wider group, the Taliban has become a so-called apostate movement for a number of reasons. One being that they supposedly don't implement Islamic law properly. So this could go back to the issue of compromises that Kamran mentioned. There's also the view that they make unacceptable outreach to the Shia minority and relations of Iran, talking about Taliban's relations with Iran. And also that the Taliban is seen as a supposedly nationalist movement, in contrast with the Islamic State, which doesn't recognize national borders, but ultimately wants a caliphate that dominates the entire globe. So there's actually a very clear ideological split between the two, for those reasons from the Islamic State's perspective. Whether all Taliban members, of course, actually are guilty of the accusations that Islamic State Khorasan province makes against them is another issue. But that's the perception of Islamic State Khorasan province of Taliban. And so for that reason, the two sides are at war with each other.
Right. So then how will the Taliban then now that the Taliban's in control of most of Afghanistan, how is it going to ensure that ISIL K doesn't gain ground in the country and doesn't continue to do attacks like the ones that we saw at the airport?
Well, I don't think it's going to be possible to completely destroy completely the Islamic State in Islamic State Khorasan province, in the sense of being able to stop it from conducting any operations. In my mind, there are always going to be people who sympathize with this project, and so there will be attacks, say IEDs, assassinations, and there could be more bombings in the future. But I am more skeptical of the idea of the Islamic State in Khorasan province being able to carve out significant territorial control for itself and establishing a state or governance project, as we saw in some of the earlier days of Islamic State Khorasan province, and also in comparison with the group at the height of its power in Iraq and Syria.
Kamran, would you like to respond to that? Because I know that at the beginning of the show, you were saying that you believe ISIL K does want to establish a caliphate and carve out ground for them.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the opportunity that Afghanistan presents as a strategic vacuum and the strategic depth that jihadists enjoy in neighboring Pakistan, I mean, this is something that, clearly points to ISIS investing so many resources into the Afghanistan-Pakistan region because of the need to establish that. I mean, they have been trying in Iraq and Syria. They established a caliphate of sorts, but it was dismantled. They lost territory, and I think it's going to be some time before they regain their bearing there. Here, the conditions are far more ripe from their point of view. There is no government in Afghanistan. Pakistan is a very, very weak state, politically, economically speaking, and is already bracing for, a spillover from Afghanistan. So, I mean, I would be really surprised if ISIS is not intending to carve out a territorial state. I think that the problem that the United States and its allies really face now is not immediately Afghanistan becoming a launch pad for attacks against the West. But I think that what we'll see is Afghanistan becoming a nucleus for another attempt at Caliphate 2.0. So that is where I think that the focus of the United States and its allies should be in making sure that does not happen. How do you do that is actually very, very difficult because you don't have reliable allies. Yes, the president is right, President Biden, when he says that the Taliban interests are what going to drive them to cooperate, but it's not going to be simple. The Taliban have to balance many imperatives, so they cannot be a reliable partner. And this is why this fight is going to be very difficult.
Right.
And I think that at some point when, the situation deteriorates, I can see the United States, conducting some operations on its own, whether the Taliban like it or not. But, this is, I'm talking about a medium-term scenario.
Okay, Fahad, final word to you. I mean, Kamran was just saying that the Taliban leadership shares security now with Western countries and the United States, or rather the importance of security in Afghanistan. So to what extent do you think that ISIL K pose a major security challenge for the Taliban right now, and how is the Taliban going to deal with them?
In the short term, the Khorasan province will continue with its policy of creating panic and chaos. However, in the long term, if they are able to gain a territory in Afghanistan and able to increase their numerical strength, then it will emerge as a main threat to Afghan Taliban. And in order to deal with this threat, it is very important that they have to ensure that the file ranks of Afghan Taliban remain loyal to them and ensure that there's no kind of any defection to Khorasan province.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much to all our guests, Aymenn Jawad Al-Tamimi, Kamran Bokhari, and Fahad Nabeel. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For myself and the whole team right here in Doha, thanks for watching. and bye-bye for now.